Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be talking about a comic book that I enjoy a lot. It's Lady Mechanika #0. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in October of 2010, Lady Mechanika #0 comes to us through Aspen Comics, which was founded in 2003 by one Michael Turner. You've probably seen Michael's work in Marvel. If I remember correctly, he illustrated the first cover for Civil War for Marvel. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he did. Michael's work is pretty amazing in its own right. He unfortunately died in 2008 after losing his battle with bone cancer. It's a pretty sad story, but his legacy does live on through Aspen Comics today. Most notably, I would assume would have to be Fathom. I'm pretty certain that's still probably the #1 title that's published through Aspen. And, it's really sad. Michael's work was really pretty incredible, and I really enjoyed a lot of what he put out. But it's nice to know that he was able to leave his mark on the industry through, not just his artwork, but by creating another avenue in which people could produce and publish their own independent works and maintain creative control of said works. Created, written, and drawn by Joe Benitez. Colors by Peter Steigerwald. Letters by Josh Reed. We see here on the very first page, well, 2 pages, and this was actually something I thought was really cool about this book, is how the inside of the front cover and the first page are a 2-page splash image to start the series off. This was a cool creative choice. You may notice down here on the bottom there are 4 separate covers shown to exist. There's actually more than that. We see here cover A, cover B, which was the one that you saw at the beginning of this video because that's the one I have, and a retailer incentive cover, which is basically just a black and white version of cover A, and then a New York Comic Con exclusive cover. And if you're trying to track these down, there's only, how many? 500 of the New York Comic Con cover. And that is not the only con that got its own unique cover to this book. Joe was doing his best to try and get this book into people's hands, get people excited about the book. So he went to a lot of conventions and created a lot of con exclusive covers for Lady Mechanika #0. If I remember correctly, and I'm just doing this off the top of my head, I think there were 9 or 10. I could be wrong about that, but there are quite a few. And that's cool for the people who were at those cons. But for the rest of us who would just like to get their hands on those covers, it kind of sucks because it's nearly impossible to do it. At the beginning of the story here, we see Lady Mechanika, the title character, hanging out on the rooftop of a building as she is on the lookout to try and potentially find a quote-unquote monster that is prowling the streets of Satan's Alley, which is assumedly in London. It's not specifically stated that that's where this is at, but this book does take place in 1878, which would have been on the back half of the Victorian era. And we do see that she is dressed in, somewhat period correct clothing. You wouldn't really see any woman walking around showing off this much skin, much less in pants at this point in Victorian England. But, it's stylized. And, this really speaks a lot about Joe's type of artwork and where he likes to go with things. We see here that she intercepts a radio transmission. Fun fact, radio did not exist in 1878. It was first really implemented in 1923. So this kind of does something that I don't want to criticize Joe so much for, because this is something that happens within the entirety of this steampunk genre, where they're not just given incredible tech for the time, they're also given tech that did not exist during the time frame that steampunk would exist in. Here on the next page, we see that Lady Mechanika pulls down her goggles. I don't know if they are night vision, but we see that one side does have a magnification lens as she scours the streets for the monster, which has reportedly been wounded by one of the other people hunting it, as there is a large buzz created by the local tabloids and papers, which have gotten every type of hunter and ne'er-do-well looking for this thing, trying to capture the reward, as well as Blackpool Industries, who are a weapons manufacturer. She spots the creature running towards, I guess, some sort of large drain pipe. She wastes no time in jumping off the building and going in after the creature because, as she states in her inner monologue, the creature is reported to be partially mechanical, which is what has surely piqued Blackpool Industries' interest because that's what piqued hers. As she approaches the creature, she takes aim, fires, hits it in the neck with a dart, and is surprised to see that the creature does not instantly go down. As she tries to fire upon the creature again, it dodges and lunges at her, attacking with its mechanical claws. It has one mechanical claw arm and another mechanical claw foot, and is some sort of weird cat-like goblin type of thing. Uh, Maybe perhaps the tail has some mechanics to it as well, but she's having a hard time dealing with it as she's dodging its attacks while trying to subdue it without killing it, and the two of them seem pretty evenly matched, at least for now. On the next page, we see the battle continues. At this point, Lady Mechanika begins to get frustrated and lobs the creature into the wall, smacking its head against the rock. She then draws her pistol and tells the creature not to make her kill it, and then is surprised when the creature speaks and says that it surrenders. She then realizes that the creature is afraid of her and is fearful of its life being in danger. She asks if the creature is all right. It turns around and we see that the creature is somewhat scared and pathetic looking and says that it's feeling weak and tired. She noticed that the dart was still in its neck and saying that's the after effects of the dart as it contains a tranquilizer. She then tells the creature that the dart won't kill it and that she just wanted to subdue it so she could take him somewhere safe to get him out of harm's way, as there are many people hunting and tracking the creature that want to hurt, if not kill it. The creature then tells her that he's feeling quite hungry, and she gives him an apple, trying to also gain his trust. She then begins to ask the creature if it knows where it came from or who made it, why it looks the way that it does. The creature is, trying to speak back through mouthfuls of food as he tells her that he hasn't eaten in days. She looks at his arm, and then he exclaims that the maker has, done its best to train him to be as polite and friendly as possible. And this catches Mechanika's interest as she is wondering who this maker might be. Here on the next page, we see an advertisement for Michael Turner's Fathom Blue Descent #2. As I stated before, despite Michael Turner's untimely death in 2008, his legacy does live on through his creation, Fathom being the most notable creation that he published through Aspen Comics. And despite having never read any issues of Fathom, I did always find the artwork in Fathom to be rather impressive and of high quality. And despite Aspen being a small company, they do a really good job of trying to have very talented artists work for them and also print very high quality books with a high quality of paper and a very professional feel to them. I've never been disappointed or felt like Aspen was ever phoning it in when they published a book. As we see here on the next page, the conversation continues as Lady Mechanika wants to know more about this master that the creature speaks of. Unfortunately, the effects of the dart are starting to become more apparent as The creature begins to speak in more incomplete sentences as it states that it doesn't know where the master is, that he was left behind when the master took off, and that he needs to try and find him. She then asks the creature if it has a name. The creature then tells her that his name is Ucky, but then realizes that he recognizes Mechanika and that while she is much older, she is the same person from his past who was indeed the one that named him in the first place. However, on the next page, we see that the creature known as Ucky has its head blown wide open. This, of course, upsets Mechanika greatly, as she was starting to befriend the creature as she realized that it was harmless. Also, she herself has very deep amnesia and cannot remember anything about her past or how she came to be the way she is or where she came from. The shot came from the Colonel here with a very strange looking type of gun that was provided to him by none other than Lord Blackpool, the head of Blackpool Industries, along with some other hired guns that they've been hunting this creature with. The Colonel, of course, believes that Mechanika is just given into hysterics and tells Dr. Little to go see to her. Lord Blackpool is actually quite upset by the fact that the Colonel has killed the creature, as it was their agreement that he was supposed to bring the creature back alive. We see here that Dr. Littleton is trying to make sure that Mechanika is okay, but she makes sure that he knows better than to lay a hand on her, as she is very angry. The rest of the bounty hunters take a look at the creature, making sure that it's dead. Mechanika wastes no time in approaching the Colonel, as he and Lord Blackpool are arguing about their payment, as Lord Blackpool states that the agreement was the creature was to be taken alive. Then the Colonel turns around to see that Mechanika is approaching and tells her that there's no need for her to thank him. She, of course, very angry, and rather than thank him, punches him square in the jaw, knocking him down, then questioning why he decided to kill that innocent creature that was not bringing harm to anyone. He then looks up and states that the creature was an abomination and an affront to God, and that because it was part machine and part living organism, that it shouldn't exist, and that it was, his duty as a Christian to put this horrible being down, and that the likes of any creature like that should be put to death rather than, sully the world with its presence. So she takes off her glove and shows him her mechanical limb and says that he should try then to put her out of her misery. And then he realizes that he is in fact dealing with Mechanika, who we weren't previously, privy to the information that she has a reputation in this world, but apparently her reputation does precede her. Here on the next page, we see an advertisement for The Scourge #2. I absolutely know nothing about The Scourge. If you've ever read this book, please feel free to leave any information in the comments about it, whether or not it was any good. It seems like it might be cool, but like I said, I have no experience with this title whatsoever. We then see that Lord Blackpool tries to have a word with Mechanika. She tells him to piss off, but then is startled when she hears a gunshot, as she turns around to see that Lord Blackpool has executed the Colonel, and she's quite surprised that he would do this. Blackpool then explains that he does not accept failure, and then tells the other men in the group that they will all be paid in full for their efforts and will be given the Colonel's share of the money as well, and that he will triple their payment if they subdue Mechanika, because he wants a live, basically clockwork cyborg, I guess is what you'd call her, specimen to do research on. She tells him that this would be a bad idea and that he'd be wise not to make an enemy out of her. And he, unfortunately, for his own safety and the safety of the men, does not heed her warning. We see here that the men surround Mechanika thinking they have the upper hand. Unfortunately for them, they were not aware of how strong and capable she is of handling herself in a fight, as she wastes no time in breaking the wrist of one of the men as another one grabs her behind the head and tries to put her in a chokehold. She then does an up kick, hitting the other man, knocking him out cold. She then throws a knee into the man that tried to choke her from behind, and by the looks of it, it's a little hard to follow the way that the artwork is done. Catches the guy whose wrist she broke with a punch, or no, I'm sorry, breaks his arm and then catches him with a punch, knocking him out. At this point, Lord Blackpool's associate tells him that he would probably be best to make a swift exit and consider his own safety, and Blackpool agrees. Mechanika then turns to Dr. Littleton and asks if he has a blanket that he can wrap the creature's body in. He states that he does, so she tells him to do so and bring the creature to her. We then see Blackpool hand a pistol to Mr. Higgins, his associate, and tell Higgins to hold Mechanika off for as long as he can so that Blackpool can escape. Higgins seems a little worried about his chances against Mechanika, as his chances are pretty well zero. Mechanika then tells Higgins, as she takes out her own pistol and reloads it, or I'm sorry, cocks the hammer back, that he would be wise not to obey the orders of Lord Blackpool, as she turns around, takes aim, and fires, striking Blackpool in the knee. We then see that Dr. Littleton brings the body of the creature to her. She takes it, turns around, walks past Higgins as she goes down the tunnel that Blackpool was trying to escape from. He then tries to reason with her, saying that he is a man of vision and that he wants to, take mankind into a new age, and that with her help and allowing him to study her and her cybernetics, that they could change the world. And then he is interrupted when she kicks him across the face, shattering his jaw, ripping one side of it completely off of his skull in a rather grotesque silhouette that we see here. She then states that this is just a warning, and if he's stupid enough to ever cross paths with her again, that she'll do far worse, as we see her walk down the tunnel with the body of the creature over her shoulder. And that is the end of the story in this issue. Here we see a large 2-page advertisement for Lady Mechanika #1. Multiple covers for this one as well. I can't remember if it was just these two or if there were also some other variants that aren't listed here. But we do see that issue #1 does not come out until January of 2011. This is probably one of my biggest criticisms about Joe Benitez, in that while his artwork is very high quality, I've always been a fan of his style of drawing and the detail that he puts into his illustrations. He is awful with meeting deadlines and getting a book out on a monthly basis, especially when the only person he's answering to is himself. We saw this in, well, obviously Lady Mechanika, but also when he was publishing Weapon Zero through Image Comics. Not the best at getting the books out on a month-to-month basis. Here on the next page, we get the beginning of a section called Through Brass Goggles, which is basically just Joe's explanation of how he came up with the idea of Lady Mechanika and how he was somewhat fascinated by the steampunk movement and genre that was happening at Comic-Cons throughout this time. It's still popular to this day, but there is definitely a very dedicated contingency of cosplayers who are really into the whole steampunk aesthetic. He states how he would, take pictures of people at the Comic-Cons wearing their cosplay and kind of use that as inspiration. We can see some of his prototype artwork here. This is the first sketch of Lady Mechanika, and then some other characters that could potentially be part of the cast in later issues. We then see here on the next 2 pages of this section more concept art for Mechanika's looks. One of the things that I do like about this book is that Mechanika's outerwear changes based on the situation. If she's just walking around town, she's dressed in the traditional garb of that day. But she also then has her tactical gear, if you will, that she wears, along with, outfits that are more appropriate to, action encounters. Like I said, wearing things like pants, which for Victorian England would have been a distinct no-no for any woman to be seen wearing pants out in public. But it's a cool little, explanation of where he was going and what his goals are with the book, as we see once again him mentioning number 1 that was supposed to be on sale in December, but again, it didn't come out until January. On the next page, we're greeted with some recipes from the Steampunk Kitchen. Here's a recipe for some cookies and some steampunk tarts. Oddly enough, steampunk cookies are legitimately just sugar cookies cut into the shape of cogwheels. At least the tart seems like it's, a more, I guess, Victorian style dessert of that time period. So, that one I appreciate a little bit more. But still, it's kind of weird to just have dessert recipes printed on a page of a comic book. And the next page, we see an advertisement for an Aspen statue, Aspen being one of the other titles printed through Aspen Comics. I don't know if this one is still in circulation. Aspen's release schedule is usually kind of weird. It seems to be less monthly in most cases and more frequently self-contained story arcs that are printed through miniseries more than anything, but that's not with everything, and I could be wrong. I don't want to talk out of turn because, again, I don't have a lot of experience with the Aspen brand as a whole. On the last page of the book, we see an advertisement for Minefield number 4. Minefield is a book I do remember seeing in my local comic book shop, but again, not a title I ever picked up and read. If you have any information or know whether or not, Minefield was any good, or if it was something you enjoyed, please feel free to leave comments about it. I'd like to know more. And on the reverse inside cover, we see an advertisement for the Long Beach Comic-Con. It was on December 29th and 31st in 2010. Just missed it. But if you were there and you had a good time, feel free to let me know about it in the comments. And that was Lady Mechanika number 0. As I stated at the beginning of this video, I really like this book a lot. I just bought it on a whim when it first came out, and I'm glad that I did. This is actually not an easy comic book to find. I want to say first printings of Lady Mechanika number 0 were a little over 10,000 books, so it wasn't like a high circulation title. But it really kind of just jumped out at me when I saw it on the shelf, and I'm really happy that I picked it up because anytime a new Mechanika miniseries comes out, I always make sure to grab it. As I stated, Joe Benitez not the best at meeting his deadlines. However, he's aware of that being the case, and he has learned from it over the years. So Lady Mechanika has never been a monthly title. It's always been relegated to self-contained story arcs that come out as miniseries, which works better, I believe, for Joe's time frame in that he can complete all 3 or 4 issues of a miniseries, draw multiple covers for each issue, and then put them to print once all the work is finished so that those 3 or 4 issues can come out, in the correct sequence, and they're only a month in between issues on their release dates. I believe this works better for him. It works better for the customers who are looking for his book. And, some might say it's a bit of a cop-out that he should be striving to push himself to get books out on time. But the reality is, if you know that's not a realistic thing that you're going to do as a creator, you're better served to work around your own limitations and put forth something that is, gonna, I guess, placate to your audience more so than just constantly missing deadlines and irritating people. But those are just my thoughts. Your thoughts may be different. You might have hated this title. You may have never even heard of this title. It's not exactly the most, out in your face character that exists throughout all of comics. But if you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.